All right, now we're live. Man, YouTube's got to get me in a bad mood, or Apple, whoever screwed it up, get me in a bad mood before I go live, for crying out loud. Gosh, I ate most of my bacon, but I still got some bacon and coffee. And cheers to you, whoever stuck around 11 minutes waiting for them to start my live broadcast. Finally, what I did was I just refreshed the page. I just clicked refresh, bam, it worked. So apparently when I do a live video, I got to refresh it before I start it. I had I set it up like 15 minutes in advance and just left it because I thought that would be the best way to go. So I didn't disconnect the Wi-Fi or anything, thinking then I can just push go live and it'll no flaws. Nope, that didn't happen. Anyway, that stuff's really frustrating. I mean, I did everything on my end in this case. I understand like some things where I had to go into the settings to let it understand that there was a microphone connected. Like that was on me because I thought it would be simple. But even then, anyway, I hate technology, even though I use it. I just hate it. The way that the people set things up, in Silicon Valley. They got this whole mindset of their own. They're a bunch of engineers and tech geeks, and they don't set it up like to make it really user friendly. And they're really arrogant. Anyway, I'm generalizing. There's some cool ones, I'm sure. Anyway, thanks, Greg. Craig, if you could tell me or anybody, does the audio change when I go over here? Because today it wouldn't let me select my microphone, so I don't know if the audio is through my MacBook or my microphone. Did the audio change there? It should have stayed pretty much the same. Well, okay. So my microphone's not working. Yesterday they let me choose an external mic, and today they didn't let me choose it. It's like there's no rhyme or reason. Maybe there's something, but like, why do they make it so complicated? Why can't it work one day and then work the following day? All right, so they're doing the best they can to piss us off. Honestly, I think here's my conspiracy stuff. They do that on purpose because it used to be that the consumer was in control, and in capitalism, that's how it works. The consumer can demand better quality. That's how it's set up. And so they've learned that if they got to keep the consumer on the defensive side of things. So there's always in negotiating. It's because that's what we're doing as a society. We're always the offensive and the defensive, and they've figured out that that's why all these updates are constant, and that's why like Facebook, they change up things all the time, and email changes up things. On my iPhone, it changes up things, and it's pointless changes. There are no rhyme. It's not like it's an improvement. Sometimes they make changes that are points and they fix bugs. But what they do is we get used to an interface, and then we can find the flaws in it and complain and expect a better quality experience and stuff like that. But they stay in control by changing it all the time, so that we're constantly having to learn. You get used to where all the buttons are and the things that you use, especially a guy like me, my personality. I do I like consistency, and I don't, um, and I use minimal features regularly. So then they change where those move, and then your brain has to learn something new, and that way they're always in control. And that way they can say, "Well, you need a new phone," and we can't unite as a people because we're busy fighting too many things. And that's just a brief way of describing the way that the corporations and businesses run everything. Because remember, in the early days of cell phones, they'd give you a phone, and now, and then it got really bad where they, instead of giving you a phone or giving you a 3-month deal to join or something like that, then it changed to where you got an upgrade. Like, you're not eligible for an upgrade. That's how the pendulum swung so badly. We're not in that phase now, but it went from free phone if you join our company to we'll let you have an upgrade early or something like that. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Now we're to the point where they'll let you finance a phone, and then they say that they give away phones, but when you look at the actual phone, it's usually like a cheap model. Like, iPhone came out with a cheap model, and they'll give you that for free, and it's not really free. They credit it monthly, something like that. It's a real scam. But they got think tanks coming up with that stuff. And meanwhile, you and me, we only think about it when we buy it or when we have a problem. And so we're no match for the think tanks. That's the whole point. They invest millions of dollars in understanding how to win at this game. And we, the consumer. And this is why I hate when people won't complain about capitalism. If you bring it up, they'll immediately tell you you're a communist. It's like, no, I'm not. I'm in a consumer world. I prefer capitalism to communism. But we as a consumer, we need to be doing our end of the deal. Because if we don't, then the corporations and businesses just run amok, have their way with us. And I don't like having my way made. All right. Anyway, anybody even watching? Yeah, true, Craig. But I can't stay angry or frustrated when I'm here. There's literally, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the birds are chirping, and there's elk up there on the hills. I don't know if we'll be able to see them. And there's no wind. Man, we've had bad wind this past week. It just makes it miserable. It could be these same temperatures, but with strong winds, and it just ruins the day. So I'm just really happy. That's the point there. That it's just so great to be outside. I pretty much just hide out when the wind's blowing hard. I try to get things done. Yesterday, I got the fluids changed in my truck. Finally, changed the transmission filter. Hey, Dead Wolf. Cheers. Change the tranny fluid filter and oil. And there's Maddie sitting on the porch. So if we can start having nice weather and no wind, I can start getting some projects done. The funny thing about my roof, I've got the equivalent of about $20 invested in my roof. That's roofing materials, not the OSB and framing. About $20 because I bought a 20 by 100 roll of plastic, and I found a semi-tarp on the highway. So the tarp was free. The plastic is all I had to pay for. And I put one layer of semi-tarp underneath because over the years the semi-tarp has had mice chewing through it. So it's hard to find a big enough piece of the semi-tarp that covers the roof. So instead of taking a chance, I put one layer down and then put that plastic on because, the wind, slight movement can wear a hole in the plastic. And then I put another layer of the semi-tarp, big heavy duty tarp that truckers use. And I put that layer over it. That way the actual waterproof material is protected by a heavy duty tarp underneath and on top. And then I just strapped it down. And it works incredibly well. And I've got enough of that tarp. So the plastic, the problem would be that the sun, the UV rays would break down the plastic and then the wind would just shred it to pieces. But because it's protected from UV rays, it is not going to deteriorate very quickly. And let's say it lasted a year. Well, then I've got more pieces of semi-tarp and I can replace it. And it's basically free. That's my point. Now I bought materials, metal, and fortunately that's the benefit of living in a small house is that if you got to remodel it, it's not going to be super expensive, but the metal roofing only costs about $600. So that's a lot of money compared to using plastic, but in the big picture, it's not a ton of money. Whoops. Anyway, for whatever it's worth, it's just kind of funny how cheap it is to finally come up with a good roof system. But the problem is it's ugly. Now that I say that, I guess I could figure out a way to make it look nice. Roll up the ends and tack them down under the eaves. Make little eaves. Huh. That's an idea. Huh. Anyway, the point is that I was going to make, the only reason to remodel that roof is not for staying dry or roofing purposes. It's just to make it look nice. Granted, with metal roofing, my dad used to say metal roofing is the way to go because it lasts 100 years. And that's an exaggeration, but it can last 100 years. And especially in a dry climate like this. But that's the only reason. The only reason I'm remodeling this thing is to make it look pretty. And honestly, I like that too. It's been my middle finger since I built it. It was my middle finger to society, where I can demonstrate that I can live more comfortably in initially it was a $500 house, and I was living more comfortably in that than people in town. And if they say, no, that's not true, I've got a really nice house. Yeah, but how many hours do you spend outside of it to pay for it? The bulk of people's time spent in their home is in bed, asleep. Well, not me. I live in my $500 house, and I'm more comfortable because I don't have to leave it every day, like people who do have to maintain their lifestyle. So it's been my middle finger. The ugliness was kind of a feature, but now it was when I was in Texas. So bless Christy, who has a horse property there and let me park my van there and didn't even worry about money because she said that she likes the arts and liked supporting it and helping people out. And that meant a lot because I was really broke. And so I had a place that I could park every night, walk the dogs, and even ride horses. It was so cool. I really appreciate her. And while I was there, she had this archery area, and I'd walk the dogs over there, and she had this little shed that looked like a house. You know, it had little shutters, two front windows, door, but it was a shed, and it had a cupola up on top of it. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, why don't you let me remodel that thing and live in it?" I just had this desire where I was like, man, I could put up a fence around it and just make it look like a cute little home, like something from a Disney movie out in the forest. And but they had other uses for it. And she was letting me remodel a trailer that I could move into. And but that one she had another purpose for it. So anyway, that got in my mind. I thought, man, when I get home, I need to do that. Just kind of set up. It's more of a civilization type style, but just a tiny little home, a little yard in the front, a little fence. Make it kind of quaint, and but that's just kind of the development that I've gone through out here. Living this way. It's called Over on the Wild Side, my main channel. And like I say, that's because I spent a lot of time saying how far into living like a wild animal do I want to go. That was initially the idea behind it. That's why I called it the wild side. And that originated back when I was 13 years old, where hanging out with my dog. And I went in the wild direction quite a bit, minimizing my life as much as possible, getting rid of refrigeration, lighting, and philosophizing about what is society, what's a good society, what's civilization, what's a good civilization, what parts of it is good, what parts of it's bad. And funny thing is, I don't know. I'm still kind of torn. Where's Royce? Royce and Jennifer. Oh, there you are. Me and Royce were talking about this, if you don't mind me bringing you up. Maybe I should have left you out of it. Hey, good morning, Stanley. Patton. Good. Yeah, thanks for the sound checks, guys. Um, uh, anyway, um, there's still a part of me that wants to get rid of everything, except for maybe my land here. And like when I go camping, I feel so free, and I'm thinking to myself, this is all I need. I'm comfortable sleeping when I got my sleeping pad and my sleeping bag, and I got enough to cook on, and I can put it all on my back or on my horse. And then I come back home, and it's like, well, I mean, I need this stuff. I need my propane burner for when I don't want to run fire. I'm looking at stuff that I've got. I need multiple pots so I can cook a big bunch of dog food instead of having to cook it twice a day. Um, I need a diesel heater. Yeah, you get back home and then all of a sudden the worries of the world weigh in again. And I hope that's not as loud in the microphone as it is in my ears. I accidentally made some crunchy bacon. Um, but anyway, so I still kind of go back and forth on that, on how minimal I want to be. But And that's what me and Royce were talking about the freedom in that. And but on the other hand, living in a society, there's also benefit to um to being able to offer something. Like the idea of creating things and not just creating it for utilitarian purposes, but adding beauty to it. And which gets into like architecture and stuff. We live in an age of minimal architecture, and that's intentional. Architecture style influences mindset of the people that live in your community. And so that's why I went what I'm getting back to my story in my mind, my ways. I wanted to go as minimal as could be and everything native. And all I wanted was my property just to stay wild, which I did at my other property and these. And but over the years, I've kind of adapted this other mindset of thinking, civilization isn't necessarily bad. There's a lot about it that's bad. Pretty crunchy. You could hear that. Well, I'm done eating my bacon now. Um, and but living as a community, there's also a lot of value to that. And as individuals contributing to it, which I don't know if you guys piece this stuff together, but these are concepts that I've been exploring through my life, but they're also the heavy hitting concepts in society today because progressivism is a push toward communism, and the basis for it is that nobody should have to do anything. The phrase that they use is you shouldn't have to pay to exist. And I used to argue with a young guy on my Facebook and then had to block him because he became irrational to an extreme. But he would say that. He said, I shouldn't have to pay to exist. And that's something I agree with. And I told him, you don't have to. I knew this kid from when he was little. And I told him, you can come out to my property and live for free. And when you pose it that way, if you guys want to live like me, that's how I'd pose it. You guys can live like me and live free. You don't have to pay to exist. I agree with you that you shouldn't have to. But then when you present them with that option, he didn't want it, and other people don't want it. And what they really mean when they say that is, I should be able to have an apartment and have a car and have Wi-Fi and have a phone and not have to pay for it. So their minimal existence is the variable, and that's what's in question. Like, oh, so what you're saying really is you think you should have participation in society and what it offers and not have to pay for it or do anything for it. That's the heart of that philosophy. And few people will acknowledge it, but man, I should get into some debates and do this stuff. And so they don't want to, it's not a philosophy of contributing. And Stanley, your generation and real Americans, we believe in contributing. And however, I think that can go too far too, and that's how we've become a slave with that. They've taken advantage of that mentality. Like even in the Indian tribes, when you read about them, there's a lot of social pressure to participate because they were literally surviving. Um, we've got life so easy, and I don't have to tell you guys that, you know it, but life is so easy. I say it all the time. I eat rice pretty regularly. I've got like a 50-pound bag or 30-pound bag of rice in there, and it cost me like 15 bucks or whatever, 20 bucks, 30 bucks, whatever it was. It's super cheap when you think about all the work that goes into making rice. And that's why it's so easy. And butter is one of the worst because you got to milk your cow every day and then churn it. And churning butter is frustrating because if it's just a little too cooled outside, it'll take hours. Unless you got electrical equipment these days, you can use a blender. So between butter and rice, all I got to do is go spend $5 and I've got enough of it for a week or 3 days, whatever. 50 bucks, I got a month's worth. Whereas Indian tribes, they were really, face to face with survival. And that's what civilization created, was more of an abundance and an easier way to live. I'm talking 3000 BC, 2000 BC, when civilization was coming together. And these days it's so easy. And so we don't have that in our face. You got to contribute, otherwise you're a dead weight on the community that's trying to survive. So it's not as apparent, but it's still there. It's still real. And so going back to my point, that's kind of where I'm at now, is where I've been able to deal with my my issues, I guess, whatever. I'm getting to a place where I realize, oh, I would like to contribute. I don't think people should be forced to contribute. In a healthy society, people contribute voluntarily. And a little more on that. That's why one of those stories that I have about a girl who wrote about what it was like out in the Great Plains. She said that as a community, they really valued their young men meaning warrior age. And she said that they had privileges in the camp. That's why when we hear about it, like, it's kind of hard watching. It's like, why are you men sitting around while women gather and chop firewood? Because in our society, chopping firewood is a manly thing, and it's kind of fun, and it's just a manly thing. But in other societies, women do it, and I saw that firsthand in South Africa. Women out there cutting firewood while the men are sitting around in suits. I'm like, this is just so weird. And I went and started helping the women, and they made me stop. And and it's not necessarily bad, because this gal explained how these young men, we needed to praise them and tell them how great they were, because they were the ones putting themselves in danger by going out and hunting buffalo, which was really dangerous, and but also fighting. They had to go out and fight to defend the tribe, the village, and they're putting their life at risk. And so that's why, as a community, when the warriors come home, they tell their stories and exploits, and everybody gathers around and cheers them on and gives them high levels of respect, because they were risking their lives to contribute, and that was their contribution. And so what I'm saying, it shouldn't have like that. To me, I'm not idealizing Indian tribes. I know that they also had some bad, but man, there's so much about them that was so amazing, and that the contribution was encouraged. Um, and so that inspires young men, because there's nothing a young man likes more than being praised for how brave he is or how strong he is. And so they used that to encourage the men, and then the men loved it, and it was reciprocal. So everybody gave. And now we live in this society where it's easier to mooch, and then you get some people who think that that's their their right is to be able to live in a free life. Going back to what I said about, well, I shouldn't have to pay to exist, which again, I agree with. But when we talk about what does exist mean, what they're really saying is they shouldn't have to pay to have the privileges of society, which come from the work of other people. So anyway, all that to say, I am coming around. to a place where now I realize where I feel like I would like to, um, be more of a have something more to offer. Even though I guess my videos have been something to offer, but I haven't been consistent in them. And it's not exactly making videos doesn't really excite me. All right, let's read some comments here. Oh yeah, Craig says you contribute with property taxes. Yeah, well, that's forced contribution, and I know that you're not saying taxes are good. Yeah, that's an example of the negatives of civilization. That's forced, and in tribal life, they would pressure each other, but you always had the freedom to leave one band and go visit and live with another band, and I think that was fairly common, um, and that way they avoided inbreeding. Um, but yeah, that's why our contribution has become basically forced. They've created so many things, so much technology that we're dependent on, and so much lifestyle that is mostly by code required that people live according to. Like if you live in town, I hated paying water, sewer, garbage because they'd constantly be raising the price. And if you had enough garbage that the lid was open this much, they charged you more money. It pissed me off. And I looked into it. I wanted to just cancel my water, sewer, garbage, and just like you can't. I just looked into it. You can't. I mean, you're kind of stuck with water in town, but it's illegal to turn off your water, sewer, garbage. Um, like now that I've lived this way, I see how I could do it, or at least make it better. But you're forced to comply. That's the point, and you're at their mercy. It's illegal to not be connected to the water, sewer, garbage. You have to keep power on, and and then you have no say in those rates. They say you do because, oh, well, you get to vote in your representatives, but we all know that's BS. We get to vote them in, but they do whatever they want, and they don't care about the people. And so the prices keep going up, and forced to be on it. There was like a minimum. Even when I was living by myself in town and barely even at the house, still had to pay that minimum, and it just kept going up. Anyway, forced compliance means forced contribution. So now you're working X amount of days of the month just to pay taxes, utilities, mortgage, car, gas. And in states like Washington, where I live, it's particularly bad. So anyway, that's forced compliance. It's not voluntarily, and that does a lot of damage to the psychology of the people. Yes, Stanley touched on it right there. Part of it's to blame. Actually, I consider that most of it's to blame with human nature because we have this keeping up with the Joneses mentality, which probably comes from, I mean, that's why I love referring to the native tribes because, like I say, they were on the brink of survival. And so they had like what they what they had a lot of ways that they needed to live in order to survive. And so it's a good way to study like what are the or ponder what are the necessary requirements of human interaction. And voluntary compliance, I think, is a big one. But along with that is also social pressure. And so I brought up the thing about the warriors, how the warriors were strongly encouraged and it made it voluntary and something they were glad to do. But there was also the element of pressure. But that's not bad in itself, where there's societal pressure of you can't, I don't know if how much that even existed because I mean the kids played warrior, when they're little kids. They get a bow and arrow from their dad and they go around with their friends. And, I don't know. It's hard to imagine that there was much social pressure for the boys, but the boys had the pretty good life. There was probably some to be brave, I guess. I mean, there had to be some guys that didn't wanna go fight battles because maybe they weren't the best fighter and they knew that. You know it growing up wrestling, and everybody knows who's the best wrestler, who's the best archer, and, who's the fastest runner. And you can imagine there were some that were on the slower end, the weaker end, whatever, and, weren't necessarily excited to fight, but probably some social pressure there from their friends. Um, and, I know for the women, what I've heard is that there was a lot of social pressure for the women, but they didn't have it as good as the men. I think they probably had it a lot better than most have it today. Because staying busy isn't bad, but man, I'm I don't know, I don't wanna sound like a feminist, but the women had a huge workload, and when I think about that, how much of a workload they had, but then you find out about things like in some of the societies, they had moccasins where they would bead the bottom of the moccasins, because a lot of tribes, they would gather together in a large lodge and do community games and, storytelling and stuff like that. And some people, I don't know how common it was, but some would have moccasins just for those occasions. And these moccasins were beaded on the bottom. And I don't have to explain, if you bead the bottom of your moccasins, that's what wears out first in footwear. So, in other words, they were wealthy enough in time that they could do something as extravagant as that, because when you're sitting, that's when the bottom of your moccasins are visible, in case anybody didn't put that together. So you're in there sitting down, what we used to call Indian style, cross-legged, or however you're sitting, and the bottom of your feet are visible, and so you decorate them. Makes sense, really. It seemed very silly at first when I heard about it, but I mean, there's some logic to it. But when I think about the workload that women held back then, I'm thinking, man, if they had time to make moccasins that were beaded on the bottom, something as extravagant as that, maybe their workload wasn't as bad as I think. I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't there, obviously. But because to me, granted, now when the white people came, the Indians, a lot of the tribes did get more wealthy right away, because you think about it, their workload involved gathering food, preparing that food. And now I've done a lot enough root gathering that I know that roots that grow naturally don't grow as big as what we're used to. Like you grow a carrot, pull a carrot, the general feeling is, okay, that was worth the effort. I want to do that again. Because you get a great big root or you get a big potato. But when you go out and grow and dig native things, at least where I'm at, everything's tiny. It's like, my gosh, I got to dig like 10 of these to equal one carrot. Wild onions are the worst. They're like the size of a pea. So you got to dig up like 100 wild onions just to get the size of two normal onions. What's normal to us. So there, anyway, I won't belaboring the point there. The women's workload, and then you got to peel all those tiny little onions. And these roots, they usually have protective covers. You got to get through those. You got to shave those off. And and then for clothing, you got to get hides and you got to dress those, which is a ton of work. And then to make those hides into clothing, what else do you got to do? You got to make your own thread, and you got to make your own needles and do all of this while you're also cooking. And like some of the roots that were used around here, they'd cook them for like a day. So you got to get that going. You got to boil water in a animal's stomach. The way you do that is you heat up rocks and drop the rocks in, and that boils up the water. So even just cooking takes up a lot of time. And so now you got that kind of a workload. And then white people come along, and they've got metal pots that you can put right on top of fire and boil water in them. And they got metal knives that don't go dull nearly as quickly as stone tools. And they got thread, and they got blankets, and they got cotton shirts. Cotton is really comfortable, and from what I've read, was very desirable. And so suddenly all these married men, their women are like, I want that. And so these married men are have the pressure to go trade and bring home things that'll make their women's lives easier. And they did get easier. And so that's why you wonder where some of that wealth of time comes from. Maybe they didn't bead the bottom of their moccasins so much before white people came. But then when the white people came and trade was really common, and they started having more things that saved time, they no longer had to make thread. They no longer had to make needles. All they had to do was the men trap beaver, the women skin them and scrape the hides, and then they trade that for stuff. And so it really changed how things were. And I forget why I went into that. But anyway, the women's workload, social pressure. I think the women had a lot more social pressure. I think the men had more internal fire to go out and hunt and be a warrior. Like, that's more exciting for a man. Not necessarily dying, but you don't really think about that until you're on the battlefield, I believe, a lot of times. And that's a lot. There's a lot more internal motivation for that than scraping hides, in my opinion. I don't know. I'd like to learn more about it. It's hard to learn this kind of stuff because there's not a ton of accounts that talk about it. Craig says, how many women were in a tribe? Probably about half as many as the total number of people in a tribe. I mean, probably pretty close to 50-50. Stanley, you're not connected to the grid. I always forget about that. I got to go get some water. I think Dead Wolf Resistance said he's off grid. And Stanley, I forget. I forget who lives how, but I appreciate hearing that because it's nice to hear how other people are living, and I like hearing that other people are doing this. That's the point. A lot of people that watch the videos want to live this way. Now, cheers, water. So anyway, society shouldn't a balance of forced compliance and I think that this attitude of shouldn't have to pay to exist. I think that comes from overly stressing out the people, which is part of engineering a society. That's why I don't know how keen you guys are to what's going on here in Washington, and about California. They're intentionally destroying our ways of life here. Washington has ridiculously high fuel prices and housing prices, and everything's ridiculous. It's really hard to live here. And then they keep making laws in favor of homeless people. And they just made a law. They just made a income tax only for people who make $1 million or more, which these days, is a huge. It's one of the communist agendas. And the thing is, so Schultz from Starbucks, the day that passed, he announced he's moving to Florida, and he's moving Starbucks headquarters to Tennessee. Now, I know a lot of people hate Starbucks, and nothing wrong with that. But what needs to be taken into consideration, for one, Starbucks is a lot of local pride. I mean, you may hate it, but it's pretty cool that he grew up this coffee shop from nothing, from one or two coffee shops in Seattle to being a big deal, and it's a major employer here in Washington, and some local pride, local identity. And so they're taking that away. And our government ran them out of town, essentially. And how many other millionaires are going to leave? I know people are leaving California in droves. And yes, I know. And then they go and ruin other cities that they move to with their politics. But the point is, it's intentional. That's part of because what they want society to be bad. Because when society is stressful and hard to get by, well, that's when people look for a solution. That's how Hitler came to power, because people were in such dire straits that he was able to tickle their ears with hope. And people who are desperate are vulnerable. And so it's intentional. It's not like when Schultz announced that he was leaving Seattle. It's not like then the governor was like, "Oh no, what did I do? Oh, this is going to backfire." They don't care. They don't care how many millionaires leave. And in fact, it helps them, because the more people who leave Washington state that are against our government, that means the less opposition they have. Like, who could influence our population? I think Schultz could have some influence if he went in a public direction and started appealing to Washingtonians and saying things like make a video of, here's where our first store started and we've provided this many jobs. And sure, a lot of people could argue with it, but a lot of people would buy into that. Like, this guy has contributed a lot to Washington state, and now he's being penalized for it. He could influence voters. He could be very influential. And that's why it's part of the system is run off those people, because then you got a population that's dependent on the government, and then the government's more powerful. And that's the reality of communism. The communism that people advocate for is that we create systems that take structure to get started, but then as the systems then are established and the people work them, then the people that governed the creation of the systems, they fade away because they're no longer necessary. It's just the pie in the sky goofiness It's just ridiculous, but people genuinely believe it. I can't believe that people actually think that that's a reality. But then they're susceptible because then they help these governments go in that direction, but they don't realize these governments are not going to let go of power when they consolidate it. And anyway, there's historic precedent for this too. That there was a great example. I wish I would have written it down. With this political party in Rome, I think it was the Roman Empire, or maybe it was before the empire. Actually, I think it was before the empire. There was political, this political group. They intentionally destroyed the economy, at least in one area, a pretty significant area. They destroyed the economy, and then they came in and started giving out free bread, so that political party was the hero. And the people, they're too busy, too overworked to realize, oh, they destroyed it so that they could be the hero. All they saw was, we're in a bad situation economically. Here's this political party giving out free bread and helping us, so we're going to be part of that party. It's a strategy that's existed for thousands of years. So it's not like I'm making this up. I'm just pointing out how it's being utilized in our country right now. And my state in particular. My state has just gotten, just the past couple months, it's become way worse. Oh, shoot. And I might be able to weather it because of how I live. But it's not a good situation. They took away the right of, because one of our saving graces here is that something that we hear a lot as our government gets worse and our gun laws get taken away, but that the sheriffs are unique. They're not like city police who works for the city. The sheriff works for the Constitution and the people, and they're voted in. And so that's like one representative force that the people have. And the government doesn't like that. And so they created a committee that gets to determine if a sheriff or a chief of police should be removed from their duties. So essentially, they took it. The people vote in somebody, but then this committee gets to say, no, the people said you can serve, but we said you can't. Very scary ramifications. Anyway, I'm supposed to be, my life is fine. I like watching things that go on. I like watching the big picture so I can see what's going on and what's happening in the world and try to interpret it for people, for myself. But I mean, look around here. I'm fine. My life is good. And we've still got a ways to go before Washington ruins things so badly that my life would really be affected. The main way I'm affected is people in these states, at least where I've traveled, from here to Texas, you find that people in these liberal states, these blue states, you call them, they're grumpy. They're not happy, stressed out in general. That's why I hate going to town. It's hard people aren't friendly. And some people are. There's a few. But it's like customer service is just gone. Like, you don't talk to people as an employee. And because, there's that idea that if you work, that the entitlement, nobody's happy to have a job. And you don't really realize it I didn't really realize it until I started going to, like, Arizona and Texas where people are, like there's life in the people. They're not walking dead is how I describe people around here. So anyway, Craig Curtis Craig Curtis. You got 2 first names, I just noticed that, or just dawned on me. Another rip-off homeowners insurance. Yes. Even if something happens, you have a deductible. Oh, yeah, insurance. We've allowed this, our country to be controlled by insurance and attorneys, lawyers. They run our our world here in America. More so, but anything that you can't do is because of insurance and lawyers. Like I can't buy a piece of property and build a log cabin in Washington because of liability and lawyers. It's all about who's going to get sued if something bad happens. And we have stupid things like McDonald's, that woman that burned herself suing McDonald's, and McDonald's being penalized because they made hot coffee, and this hot coffee burned this woman because she didn't know it was going to be hot. And that's just one great example. And so after that, everywhere makes hot drinks not to exceed, I don't know, what is it, 180 degrees? They made a maximum temperature, and now that's what everybody follows. Um, it's just one great example of how everything's controlled. It wasn't like, hey, what makes the best coffee? Because I think hot temperatures make better coffee. So it wasn't about, our coffee isn't about what makes it best. It's about what keeps us from being sued. And it's not even about being safe. Like I could even understand, okay, guys, let's cool off on the hot coffee. If nobody's getting creamer and it's just hot coffee or hot tea without creamer, let's make it some safe level so that we don't hurt people. Like I could buy into that. I mean, not if it's like telling people you have to do it that way, but if a company did that, I'd understand that. But it's not about that. It's all about money. We don't want to get sued, so we have to set up parameters. When I built my hay shed, it's torn down now, but uh, somebody, they put a sticker on it saying I had to tear it down. And I called and I said, why? And they said, well, because the safety of your animals. Well, I'm concerned about the safety of my animals, and I just put hay in it now anyway. But they said, nope, we control what's safe. Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir here. But yeah, insurance and lawyers. There was a third one. I thought of it the other day. There's one more that we're controlled by. I can't remember. So anyway, that's a lot of doom and gloom. I don't mean to be a downer, but this is the stuff that's just so visible to me. My eyes are open, as they say. And in the last 9 years of living this way, I've been able to see what I call the lies of society more and more clearly, especially as I have explored different ways of living this lifestyle of things that I don't need, things that I do need. Healthy food, my gosh, that's one that I won't even go into. But once you start opening your eyes to what unhealthy food is and what healthy food is, and I have a very sensitive stomach to that stuff. Like I can't eat Subway, I can't eat fast food. It upsets my stomach immediately. So I kind of have that advantage. But other people who are used to it just don't realize what they're putting in their bodies. And it's normal. Like when I go to town and I'm hungry, which is a stupid mistake, I can't just drop in somewhere and get a snack because everything there. I've thought about doing a video walking around the stores and describing how everything there is garbage. It's so hard to find anything. Like even bread, it's hard to find natural bread. In other words, stuff that's just salt, water, and organic flour, whole wheat flour. Let's see. When I go to town and I need a snack, there's nothing I get that's really healthy. Um, like even a lot of vegetables have unhealthy stuff, but I guess you could say some fruit and vegetables could be found. Uh, 180. What's that? What was that in reference to there, Stanley? Um, Craig says I can walk out back, and if I didn't have news device, I wouldn't know we were at war. Yeah, exactly. Are you in West Texas, Craig? I forget. I've been seeing land for sale. I always look for land for sale in other states. Found 80 acres in Oregon that's really tempting because it's out in this area that I really love, and thousands of acres of public land. Oregon is a lot less populated than Washington, and you can tell it. Like even out here, there's access to public land and stuff, and so there's people out here occasionally with their side by sides and stuff, and which I'm not against that. I love Americans getting out and using public land, but uh, it'd be nice to be a little more remote. But it's hard to leave this place. It's so perfect here with my artesian well and all the native plants that grow up here, and I don't know. It feels like home. But I sometimes entertain the idea, mostly because I'd like to build an old west town, and I can't build here in my uh, state, the whole state. I could say county, but it's not a county thing, it's statewide. I can't just build up a building. If I did it through the permit process, like I looked at it for my other property out with the creek, I wanted to build an old west town out there. And so I looked into a little bit if I was to do it where I could open it for the public. Well, once you bring the public in, then it's really expensive. They required, and even then, it wasn't too horrible. It could have been done, but I would have had to dig a well. That would have cost about 60 grand once I get the pump in it and stuff. And I had to have public restrooms. It could be a standalone building, and that requires a septic and running water. And then, of course, you're going to have some electricity going to that. And then what I wanted to do was like an Old West saloon and an Old West theater where I could do comedy and music shows and put on and westerns just for free. And I wanted to create a place where the community could come out and hang out without having to spend 30 or 50 bucks a person just to um, to go out and be social. And but then you got minimum building requirements, say again, insurance and attorneys requirements. You got to build. I think that I didn't get into it too much because they're difficult to talk to sometimes down there. One of the guys was really cool at the county. I appreciated him, but the code, I think you got to run. I think you have to run a sprinkler system inside for in case of fire. And however, I think that the building requirements weren't that strict. You have to have a concrete foundation, which is a challenge. But besides that, like I think that it would be allowed to have a dirt floor. That's a way to save money, and it's true to the old west. And also when you sweep the dirt floor, it gets hard to where you can sweep it, so it's not that ridiculous. And then people can just spit their tobacco on the floor, spill drinks on the floor, and it's not a problem. But so I think the building requirements weren't too strict. But the problem was once you go that level, like I just wanted to create a place where people could hang out, like people from the community come and spend time. But once you get to that level, now you got to hire employees, and it just becomes a huge business. And as I looked into it, I'm like, I would just be running a business at that point. I wouldn't be creating a place for people to hang out so much. And that's how we keep cool things from being done. And instead, we just have all these businesses where it's super expensive for people to go and all kinds of rules and regulations and stuff. Oh, 180. Yeah. All right. Stanley responded. Yeah, 180 for coffee. Yeah, which is barely even hot. I use boiling water. Like I said before, they say that to make the right cup of coffee, it takes 180 degrees, but I think that's BS. I use boiling water all the time, and it tastes great. I'm pretty sure that just went around because of that's what Starbucks and McDonald's have to do, and it get it got pushed into people who make coffee. The coffee aficionados just say it makes the optimum cup, but I haven't found that to be true. Oh, you're in Fort Worth. I haven't ate fast food in years. Yeah, me neither. Like the only thing I go to McDonald's for is occasionally coffee, because Starbucks coffee is so weak. I like Starbucks flavored coffee. I like the way that they do their coffee, but their drip coffee is just so weak to me. I like really strong coffee with heavy whipping cream, and they've got mediocrely strong coffee, so it's too watered down. Which means then my only drink from Starbucks is 2 shots of espresso with some heavy whipping cream, and that's good, but it's like $3.50, and it goes too quick. So I try McDonald's, and they've got decent coffee, and it's not too expensive, and they've got an iced coffee that when I'm in town and I need coffee this summer, it'll be iced coffee from McDonald's. But that's the only reason I go there, and I always look around like I hope nobody sees me going in here. And, uh, North Dakota is a red state for what it's worth. Usually a good thing. Yeah. Well, probably not this year, but maybe 2027. I'm finally going to be able to do my thing that I've been wanting to do. I want to travel for about 2 months, hit the Dakotas, hit Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona. For one, I just want to see these places. Maybe at the same time, I'll do my Laura Ingalls Wilder tour of all the locations. Anyway, I want to travel around for 2 or 3 months and visit all these places that I'd like to see. And part of my goal is to see if I want to relocate. Like I've talked about intuitive living. If I go somewhere and I'm like, my insides are just calling, like, hey, this is home, and I didn't know it, then I'll sell my property here and relocate. It's not because I think I need to relocate. It's more just a idea that I've had. because Washington's going so downhill. And but I love it here, so I'm not anxious to leave. I'm not trying to leave. It's just something that I want to do. Travel around. I mean, if it, but I also just want to travel around anyway, not just to move. It's just like multiple reasons to go and do it. Um, a guy that I know, a Texan that I know, he goes out to the Colorado New Mexico border, and he sent me pictures. And I was picturing is I like the mountains here, but I prefer the open. And so because our mountains, you go up there and there's just trees everywhere and it's really steep. And so it's not like you can go up there to ride horses and be like, oh, I want to go explore that way. No, you got to go on the trail. And if you or nobody else has gone and cut the deadfall trees off the trail, you can't even take that trail. So it's kind of frustrating because, I mean, I don't want to just go up and use trails that other people worked hard to open up. So I have to figure out how to go up there and start helping out with the trail clearing. But then it's like, it's not my kind of thing. I don't want to go up there and just like ride the same trail all the time or spend a week opening up a trail that hasn't been opened up in years. But that's how our mountains are. That's how they are. And it's cool. I mean, we've got some great access to beautiful country. But he sent me pictures of this place in Colorado. It was like 8,000 foot elevation, maybe it's 9,000 feet. And it was just wide open, rolling hills and areas of forest, but areas of open prairie. And I see other pictures of open terrain kind of like that. And I think to myself, my goodness. And I look on Onyx maps at all the public land, and you see just thousands of acres in these states. And I think to myself, my goodness, I wonder if that's high elevation, rolling hills with creeks and forest and open prairies. And I got to go find it. I want to go look around because if that's the case, there's going to be good advantages and negative. Like if I were to buy a place at 8,000 feet elevation, hopefully the summers would be cooler. I've told you guys before, I've checked, there's towns in Colorado at 9,000 feet elevation, and I've looked at their summer temperatures, and it's like the highs in the 70s. That sounds like a paradise to me. But that also means I'd need to get a place in Arizona or Texas where I could go for the wintertime and not be in 6 feet of snow. I like wintertime well, no, I love wintertime now, but I don't think I'd want to be in a place that's like negative 20 degrees. I like wintertime here. And so, but the land is cheap enough. I could buy property in two locations. If I left here, that's what I would do. I would buy two places. Um, and so anyway, because here I can take my horses out onto public land, but there's a lot of private property that blocks it, and so it's hard to get a route. And then, like I said, once you do get out far enough, it's really limited because everything's so steep. You got to be careful that you find the right trail, or else you'll get blocked. and and I mean, it's great. Washington has some great public land access, but if I could find something that suits what I like better, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Stanley Eric says, "Yeah, I like my hot coffee hot and strong." Yeah. Don't forget Texas. Yeah. Now I think my ideal life there that I'm describing here would be rolling hills at 8 or 9,000 feet elevation, surrounded by public land. That gets snow in the winter, and then come New Year's Day, I pack up my horses and my dogs, and we go to Texas, where I get some cheap land there and have a place to keep my horses. But then I'm close enough to cities where I could then go out and do comedy and music. I don't necessarily want to get into comedy again, but honestly, it would be fun to be able to be in a red state where people still have fun, go out socializing, and go out and do that stuff. Like I would enjoy that. Do that for a few months of the year, and then go back to my high elevation. That to me would just be a fun life, I think. I almost stayed in Texas. You guys may not know this. I was this close to staying in Texas the last time because down there, like I say, people are having fun. It was a different scene down there. Like the comedians were more fun. Um, it wasn't like up here where, man, if you say the wrong word, suddenly everybody glares at you. And not the audience necessarily, but in the comedy scene. And the very few comedians here that aren't progressive minded, it's so dominant here that they all just play along. And I didn't enjoy it here. That's why I'm really glad to not be doing comedy. But if I was in Texas, different story. I'd probably, because that's why it was hard to leave. I almost stayed there. If my living situation had been better, I was going to stay in Texas. Wouldn't that be weird? Funny how easily life could change. But man, when I'm here, I don't want to go anywhere. When I'm here in Washington at home at my place, I don't even like the idea of leaving. So anyway, sitting next to my sagebrush tree. These are my trees for now. I'm probably not going to leave this. For all that talk, I want to tell people I probably won't leave because there's so much that's great about my home. Like, for one, I've got drinking water coming right out of the ground. There's a lot of ways that a well is better than a creek. Is even if I could find property at a high elevation that had a creek flowing through it, a creek can be limited in its use. Even though at a high elevation it might be easier to boil it and make it usable. But my creek at my other property, a lot of the time of the year it was just really dirty. But anyway, I'm I'm setting this place up as though I'm going to stay. I'm going to plant some trees for shade. I'm going to place them strategically. I'm doing what I call my landscaping. I'm leaving a few of these because they're the only trees I've got for now, but they're bushes. And but I'm making this place livable and more pleasant. Hopefully I'll get about 5 or 6 trees planted this year. And that includes running drip lines to them so that they can flourish. Little by little, I'm clearing this out. You probably can't tell, but I moved some more yesterday. And now that the ground is drying up, I don't want to drive on the ground when it's really muddy. So it's drying up so I can keep removing a lot of sagebrush. Here's that one I was sitting by. I really like these. I think they look really nice. I don't like them so much when there's 30 of them all together. Anyway, I've got a great place here. Craig says it's hard to live primitive in Texas. Summer, everything wants to kill you. Yeah, Texas. It's so weird to read about those Texas cowboys and how much people went to Texas because, I mean, I love the state and I get the draw, but my goodness, the summers are so intense. And like you said, everything wants to kill you. Even the plants want to kill you. Like around here, we've got rattlesnakes, and that's about it. And they mostly will leave you alone if you give them the opportunity. But man, I still get scared. I found that little hideout when I was on my first trip to Austin, and it was so hot, and I needed a place to hang out that was natural. And I found this city lot that was next to a park where I went down to the creek. There was a creek running through. So me and the dogs would hang out there in the shade and gave the dogs a chance to cool off. And we didn't have to run the air conditioning constantly. And I thought about walking across the creek to explore the other side. And right there where I was going to cross, I then saw a water moccasin, and I've got video of it. Man, it still scares me thinking about my dogs being in that water and me being in that water. We might have stepped on that freaking thing. I've been scared of water in Texas ever since I first watched Lonesome Dove and that Irish guy died in the river. So then I was trying to be brave, thinking, well, maybe I could cross this right here, even though I'm scared of Texas water. And then sure enough, I saw a snake right there. So that just affirmed my fears. Even though I had a friend down there, he used to swim in the rivers. And he and I went to a river and he jumped in. It was nice, clear water. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I kind of regret that. I probably would have been fine right there in that spot, but especially after he did. But anyway, whoever said fears are reasonable, they're not always logical. Anyway, how long we been going? Oh gosh, almost an hour and a half. Well, this is so nice. I got to go to town soon, but I'm not gonna go today. I prefer to go to town when it's windy. When it's pleasant like this, I don't want to leave. Don't want to waste these days. There's not enough of them. Every year is different too. Some years are really windy, some years aren't. But this is just perfect. Not hot, not hot yet, but sunny and warm enough. Well, makes you wonder what kind of year we're going to have. Well, anyway, I should probably cut this off now. Thanks for joining me, guys, and everybody that contributes with comments. Oh, shoot, Royce and Jennifer, I missed one of your comments. I forgot that. We're struggling with living in the rural area or moving in town. Gas prices are awful, and it's just a lot. Oh, that sucks. Are you guys getting hit with bad prices? Apparently you are. Um, yeah, hopefully these bad gas prices don't last. I mean, they're going to last in Washington because they've added state taxes. I can't show you the horses because this is the pen that I've been using that is close, but I've got another pen up higher, and I left them in that pen last night because it wasn't windy, and so they were fine there. But it's too far away. I can't walk that far, or I'll lose the internet. But I got to do the shoes again on Nam Num Ken. I was gonna do them yesterday, but I changed the fluids in my truck instead. And I don't know. Maybe today I'll do her shoes. And then next time I'll grab the horses, or maybe I'll bring them over here during the video. Well, all right, guys. I'm going to figure out what to do today. And thanks for joining in. I'll see y'all next Saturday. Enjoy your day. God bless America. And as always, remember, life's a lot more fun over on the wild side.